Welcome back to another episode of Luke Blues Talking. Joining me tonight are regulars Lawrence Nelson and Brian Martin. We discuss K Park, Stair Park, Forthbank, and Hampden Park as well. Um, let's start at Hampden, Lawrence. I guess disappointed, but equally no great surprise. Would that be fair?
I've thought about this one. It's the biggest shock since at 5 years old I once licked an old ever ready battery. This was the outcome that I expected ever since last Wednesday morning, when it kind of sank in from the Tuesday night what had happened. I just didn't see any way back for us. Do I think the club had a good case? Yes, I do. I think there's a lot of things that probably won't get talked about officially that we've all heard about. I think we had a good case. I think there was not really somebody out there hanging us out to dry because yeah, we could have done things better as a club. I'm getting we could probably have checked in with the SFA for one thing. That's probably the main thing I am hearing that we should have done. I don't know absolutely everything about this, but disappointed. I don't think for a minute we tried to intentionally break the rules. I don't think for a minute we tried to intentionally get an advantage over Queen's Park. I think, as I said last week, I find it slightly laughable that we could be deemed to be seeking an advantage by bringing in a youngster, very good keeper who I know, Lyndon Tass, who's 17, never played an SPFL game before in his life. But equally, Queen's Park are within their rights to turn around and say, well, you say that, but the guy saved a penalty in a shootout, which effectively put Stranraer through. I am thoroughly disappointed. But it was absolutely no shock or surprise when the outcome was announced from Hampden.
What about yourself, Brian? Is it as brutal to say rules are rules at the end of the day?
Yeah, I'd accepted it last Wednesday. After the what happened at Stair Park on the Tuesday night. They were toing and froing, and I brought George Frank back up the road. In the car, and we were in Pine Bovril, and George says it's not looking very good. And when I didn't get home at 2 o'clock, and I looked at the rules, blah blah, and I knew it was captains for us because the SFA go by rules. As you say, rules are rules, and they've took the letter of the law, and I don't think they could come to much option because if we hadn't get thrown out Queen's Park, we'd have probably took it further. Maybe lawyers and all the rest of it. So they had to throw us out, but a bit of shame. I think mainly for the players, but for everybody, we're all disappointed. Fans, committee, media, we're all disappointed. But what do you do? We could talk about it for 10 years, and we still can't turn the clock back, can you? It's done, it's done. And we've just got to move on. And I think the players showed on Saturday, they've already moved on. And I think the players would know on Wednesday or Thursday they hadn't much chance of the appeal or, being the appeal by Queen's Park being upheld. I think the players knew. And for going for what I heard on Saturday, the players had accepted it as well, and we're just going to get their minds on moving up this league, and try and get a playoff position.
You were there on the Tuesday night, as you said, Brian. When did you have an inkling, I guess, that things perhaps weren't as happy as they should be, I guess?
Well, see, I'll give you my timeline, Carmi. It was saying on online during the game, this guy's not registered, but it might be different if it's an emergency loan. I actually said on reading out the teams, it's an emergency loan because I thought that's what it was. I think it was before the extra time, after the full time whistle, extra time. This wee guy, suited and booted for Queen's Park, came up and whispered into the Queen's Park press area for about 40 or 50 seconds. And in hindsight, I now know what that was. He was saying, look, this is okay, guys. They're playing an ineligible player. We've got this. And I'll go into it later on, but that sticks in my throat. Anyway, so we're doing the stair, and I've seen people online saying, Tiff knew about it. He didn't know about it. When he done the presser, he didn't know a thing about it. He gave me a cuddle, he gave George a cuddle. He was ecstatic. Then we spoke to Don Plank, who didn't know anything about it, And then we spoke to Lyndon Tash, who didn't know anything about it. So these players knew nothing about it. The first time I came out of the press area, probably maybe 11 o'clock would it be, I seen BJ call, and you'd have thought somebody had died. The place went absolutely flat, and BJ was explaining the story, and I says, "Oh no, don't tell me." And then a committee member got us into the press room and says, "Look, Queen's Park had put an objection in, or appeal, because we played Lyndon Tass and the right paperwork hasn't been put in." And actually, for there, I actually accepted we're going to get kicked out here, because that is the rule, and if we've not done something right, we are kicked out. And and the place was absolutely. I mean, we didn't leave the building till 11:30. George and me were the last people to leave. And the atmosphere had changed from being elated to being deflated. Everything had changed within the space of 15 minutes. And what sticks in my throat is, I know I'm probably being Peter Pan here, but Queen's Park knew before the game we had a player who couldn't play in that game. Now, would Stranraer have maybe said, if they're at Queen's Park had a player, look, you're playing a player here who shouldn't be playing? But they knew, and it was just the smugness of them, or their press, their committee. They knew that they had us, and no matter what happened in the game, they were going to get through. And that really sticks in my throat. It's like, I don't know, these guys are too young for wacky races, but it's
Absolutely not.
something like Dick Dastardly would do. You know how Dick used to change the signs, go this way, and we Motley would go, it's something like that. They knew what was happening, but they did not say a word. And that is sticking in my throat, actually. I mean, but it's dog eat dog, isn't it? They knew they were, and I mean, it's Queen's Park were perfectly right to say, no, we don't need to tell them. But my geez, it sticks in my throat how they knew we were playing an eligible player, and they never said just before, even half an hour before kickoff, they would see the team lines and say, well, because it's happened to them in the competition, and that's how they knew right away we were playing a player who shouldn't be playing. And I mean, when it took 5 minutes to say, look, guys, this guy shouldn't be playing. I'm maybe in Peter Pan land and think, well, everybody should be nice to each other, but it just sticks in my throat that what happened that night.
Just sticking with yourself for a minute, Brian. I've said before that for me, kind of football's all about making memories, those kind of moments. At the end of the day, obviously we're out of the cup. But as I said, you were there, Brian, for, I was going to say the 120 minutes. It was a wee bit longer than that in the end.
Yeah.
If you look back on that game at the end of the season, what do you think is going to be your kind of overriding memories, emotions from that night, from the actual football side of things?
Oh, I mean, getting away from all the politics. I mean, I think it was a great, fantastic night at Stair Park or the Lime Stadium. We got in it's just one of those cup nights under the floodlights. A very, very muddy park. And I think I touched on it last week. It was, I mean, the performance with the Stranraer players. We've seen it on Saturday. They were out on their feet, and see it on the night. That's how I probably feel more sorry for the players than anybody else, because they absolutely ran their heart out, and it was a great performance. I mean, they're a championship team, and they played their star players. It wasn't a kids team, it was their star players, and we beat them over 120 minutes. So no matter what, we can't take any away from Stranraer FC. It was a fantastic night against a championship team whose budget is probably 10 times ours. I don't know, but it was a great performance for the players.
I guess, Lawrence, now and Saturday passed, but it's all about how Stranraer react now, I guess.
Just, if you don't mind, I just wanted to unpack. There's 2 or 3 things Brian said, and I'm not going to disagree with him, but it's just things he's touched on. So it's the whole emotion of the fans. I agree with him, actually, that probably the people I feel most sorry for are the players. When you saw the reaction at the end of the penalty shootout when Lewis Hunter had scored again, by the way, he's clinched another penalty shootout winning goal. I feel sorry for them. I agree with Brian. I think they'd accepted by Saturday that we're moving on. It's the whole raw emotion of the supporters. I've seen somebody online saying, whoever did this at the club should be booted out, and I just think I've got to address that because I just think that is ludicrous. You're talking about volunteers. It's a mistake. A mistake has been made, and by the way, the same red tape rules apply to us as apply to Celtic, Rangers. I don't know, picking somebody, Vale of Leithen, Wigton and Bladnoch in the Scottish Cup. You're really relying on somebody getting around some really complex rules. Without going back over old ground, we had to have two keepers for a cup game. We had to have keepers that were registered correctly. There was a hell of a lot going on in the space of those 2 or 3 days since the first game was cancelled. And my God, I wish now that the referee hadn't cancelled the home game on the Saturday. In terms of Brian saying that he feels gutted that Queen's Park didn't tell us, I know where he's coming from. I don't have an axe to grind with that. I would fully expect if Stranraer 2 or 3 years' time spotted another team were playing an ineligible, can't even say it properly, player, we would be putting in a complaint afterwards if we were lost. But I take his point, it's hardly the Corinthian spirit that the game started out with in the home counties in England in the 1870s or 80s, the old Etonians playing against their mates from some other school. So no, I've no axe to grind with Queen's Park, but come back to the emotion of the fans, I find myself in the really unusual position of hoping that Rangers absolutely stuff them in the next round. Not because I hate Queen's Park, but because I just don't feel as if they've earned a place in that round. And criticise me all you like, but that's just the gut feelings of schadenfreude of a football fan. But you're right. I haven't answered your question. We need to move on. You're right. And actually, I think the players showed on Saturday that mentally they had moved on. And actually, it's a good place to start with Saturday, because my big concern at the end of last week was how will the players react to that? What a hell of a job Tiff, Ginge, all the rest of the guys, Fess, had in picking those guys up. It doesn't sound as if they had to do a hell of a job in picking the guys up. The guys mentally on Saturday had moved on, Cameron.
Just we'll move on to the trip to East Kilbride.
Cammy, can I just come in there?
Yeah.
My last thing I'll say about it. Stranraer, everyone knows Stranraer needs seats which are going to cost about 40k in the main stand. We need floodlights. That can be put to the side. But a great PR thing by Queen's Park. They've not won, but they could say to Stranraer, look, get your seats. I know I'm in Peter Pan land again, but it'd be a great PR stunt by Queen's Park. Get your seats, guys. We'll foot the bill. But I think it's 40k they're looking at. We've got the tie or a technicality. You get your seats. It'd be, I'm hoping somebody for Queen's Park's watching this.
I think there's more chance of the three of us clubbing together for the new seats in the front.
I know, but I mean, it'd be a great. I mean, this could sewer relations between Queen's Park and Stranraer for quite a while. I mean, it really could. And if they say, like, okay, guys, you get your seats, we'll fit the bill, we'll move on. Well, I think it'd be a great publicity stunt for them, and Stranraer will get their seats. That's all I'm saying on the subject.
In terms of Saturday, Lawrence, which already seems a wee while ago, to be honest, with everything that's gone on with postponements and everything else. First things first, regardless of what had come before, a great result for Stranraer.
Absolutely fantastic result. As I say, the players had clearly come out determined, put the whole cup thing behind them, come out determined to kick on with a good run. I picked up in your preview about us not having lost in the league away from home since August. I mentioned it in the highlights at the start of the game. Didn't want to tempt fate, but in some ways that should have underlined that it wasn't really a huge shock. I was quite intrigued. I watched both sets of highlights, and I don't buy in the sort of criticism of the young lad. I think it's Cy Ferry's son who does these Kilbride highlights. Because actually, I think if the guy sticks in there, he knows what he's about in terms of commentary. The only thing that kind of grabs people is the fact that he's young and he's got a high-pitched voice. And we've all been there. We were all kids, so I don't buy into that. But there were one or two things he did say that I picked up on. He said it was the weekend of the underdogs with ourselves and Clyde beating the top two. He also mentioned it was East Kilbride's biggest game of the season, which I didn't quite get. especially considering they were playing Spartans 3 days later at home. However, from a Stranraer point of view, it all started off, it's a difficult week. We hadn't lost away in the league since August. And I think Brian Martin summed it up when James Dolan hit our opener. At that point, it was kind of eeksy-peeksy. The game was on a level. We'd threatened, they'd threatened. But what I would say is that I think looking back, our highlights didn't show that much of the second half. We saw Darren Lang sending a shot at their keeper. We saw Dom Plank, by the way, having an attempt first with, I think, his right foot and then with his left foot. Might have been the other way around, which was quite interesting. But we didn't show that much in the second half. The East Kilbride highlights showed a lot of the second half, and I felt that was because in the second half, they actually had a fair number of shots at our goal, but actually they were, you've been the reporter of games, Cameron, it was the old-fashioned journalistic sentence, flattered to deceive in the second half. They had a lot of possession. We maybe shouldn't go on about Mick's liking for possession stats, but I'll mention them anyway. They had a lot of possession, but my God, second half, Brian will tell you, the game looked as if it was already in the bag.
Before the deadlock was broken, Lawrence, I think East Kilbride had one really good chance from a corner. I think Matty Gillis clears one off the line, and I think he might kind of block the rebound as well. We scored twice within a couple of minutes after that, I guess. To use the football cliche, it's those fine margins.
Aye, absolutely. I think you're right. I think McCluckie had a nice shot from distance that whizzed past the post. But you're right, and I think in commentary I thought it was Max Currie. We've also got to mention the fact that Maxie was back on Saturday, and no bad way to start with a clean sheet. I thought he had blocked it. Actually, looking at the highlights, it looked like Matty Gillis had got rid of it the first occasion, and then his body was in the way the second time. You're right, it's fine margins. We go up the park and score. And although I think of our goals, the second one was the lovelier bit of football, you have to pay tribute to James Dolan, the baby-faced assassin. That needed a cool finish, squeezing that between, just checking the name, Craig Hepburn and his post. It was a really cool finish by James.
I was going to ask that, Brian. You hear commentators, you hear pundits saying goalkeepers shouldn't be beaten at their near post. I'm sure if Max Currie or any other goalkeepers listening to this, they'll be thinking that's absolute nonsense just because goalkeepers get beaten wherever, they've got a big area to cover. Do you see it as a cool finish by James Dolan, or do you see it as the goalkeeper kind of showed him the way?
Yeah, I think it was a really cool finish by James. It was, it was a lovely finish. But I think he was in two minds. The keeper, will he go across me, and put it into to my right hand side, or will he go, and he was caught in two minds. Maybe he hadn't positioned himself well enough, I don't know, but it was a lovely finish. It was a lovely, cool finish, and we could see it where Lawrence and me were, up in that hellish.
Right behind the line of the shot.
Yeah, we could see it. We were right behind him, and Lawrence called it. It was a lovely shot between Hepburn and the goal. And it was such a crucial goal because that first goal was going to prove crucial, and it did, because we went on to get a second. And then the second half was pretty a non-event actually.
How important is that, Brian, to kind of strike while the iron's hot? I guess that obviously we get that goal, as it's been said, it was kind of level at that point. Kind of both teams had the odd chance. How important is it that when the other team's reeling to then go and get the second, and all of a sudden the complexion of the game looks totally different?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, once we scored that second, you never felt you're going to get beat actually, because the team were so good at the pressing and such like. My apologies to Aaron Quigg. I'm quite sure he's watching this. I thought it was Matty Gillis who'd set up Evan Dunn, but it was Lawrence called it right in commentary. It was Quiggy. But my excuse is they're quite like each other for a distance, so that's my excuse. But apology to Quiggy if I got that wrong. But I mean, you're right, and I think one of the guys said in a chat, if the young boy Cleland hadn't touched it, Darren was right behind him to touch it in. So with two strikers there, they're just going to put it in the net. So it was a lovely goal, and that's one thing that they really are good. That the Aitkens, they know how to set up a game. They really are good at it. Games like that, and as I say, second half was a non-event. We just managed the game out great. And they never, I don't think they really looked at scoring. I mean, the stats said that they didn't have a shot on target, but I think Young had a shot for a free. Is that called a shot on target, is it?
I think they had a few, but they were all right.
Aye.
Thank me for saying this, but they all seem to be right at Maxi.
Aye. So I was quite surprised that they said there was not a shot on target for East Kilbride, but I don't know what they call a shot on target.
The two that we just discussed that were blocked by Matty Gillis were surely going
Yeah,
in
both of
without
them were.
being
Yeah.
Yeah,
being
that's true.
stopped by whether it's a keeper or a defender.
That's
Um,
true.
Lawrence, in terms of the second goal, I imagine that's the sort of goal that any manager, whatever the level, just absolutely loves. That you've got Cleland forces the mistake, James Dolan wins the ball, Aaron Quigg's kind of sensible, holds it up, waits for Evan Dunn to go on the outside. Evan Dunn puts in a brilliant cross, and then you've got Dean Cleland there with what's basically a kind of a poacher's finish. As I say, if a manager was kind of getting the whiteboard out and drawing what he wants the goal to look like, I imagine that's pretty much it.
Aye, absolutely. It was a lovely goal. Particular nice bit for me was the fact that Quiggy had the presence of mind. He could almost hear Evan Dunn breathing down his neck, coming up and just slipped it into his path nicely. What a cross. And as Brian said, I didn't appreciate it at the time, but Darren was at the back post if Dino had missed it. But I think we need to talk about Dean Cleland because it feels like he's a young man who's actually like now settling in comfortably in the team. He pulled a not too bad shot into the side netting earlier in the game, and I think Brian was absolutely spot on. I think was it Jack Leach. Dean Cleland set off in a very early run up the park, and Leach was pulling and pulling and pulling up all the way. And Leach, you could argue, judged it right. It was just a little enough pull at the referee, like, I'll no stop him, I'll no stop him. But it was enough to put him off, and it was enough to give the keeper time to actually get in a nice position. But what you had was that one from Cleland. You had the one into the side net, and then arguably the easiest one of the lot, just stabbed it home. But the build up to the goal was lovely, even from James Dolan's sort of overhead kick in the middle of the park to win possession, and all that, as you've kind of hinted at, Cameron, straight while iron's hot. I reckon it would be comfortably less than 2 minutes since James Dolan's first goal. But lovely bit of football in the lead up to it.
I mentioned this on Saturday night, Lawrence, but one of the things that really kind of stuck with me from that goal is that every outfield player is involved in the celebrations. It's not a case of, I don't know, one of the defenders is kind of getting back into position. Everyone's enjoying it. You always hear about how great the dressing room is, and maybe I'm a gullible idiot who's fallen for it, but there does seem to be a kind of a genuine bond amongst the squad.
And I've bored you all before with this. I think that is the difference. I'm not saying a team that gets on well with each other will automatically win something, but I think if you've got a team that isn't getting on well with each other, you're not going to win anything. George, I think, shared us a bit of footage online just between a few of us on Saturday night, and it was the bit for Dino's goal which didn't have Brian and I shouting and roaring on it. It was like the noise of the crowd and the noise of the players at that end of the park. And that was actually marvellous to hear, just the roar from the Stranraer fans. And one of the players certainly talked about that post-match, the roar of the Stranraer fans behind the goal, and also you could hear the shouts of the players celebrating. And that was marvellous, because you don't kind of hear that when you've got Brian shouting bang bang at top volume, or me shouting something incoherent over the top of him. So yeah, the team seemed to be in a good place, and that's why I felt really gutted for them last week with what was happening. But equally, credit to them. They've just taken it in their stride and let it to hell with that. Let's just keep going.
We seem to have developed more of a ruthlessness. Is that fair, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely, Cameron. I mean, for the first time in years, we seem to be able to stick to a game plan. If we lose a goal, we used to lose another goal. But this team are so, what's the word I'm looking for? So switched on. They know what each other's doing. And they just follow each other. And it's great to see. And the players are the guys around the park. But I'll say it again, the Aitkens really know how to set up a football team. Gingy's had loads of experience. Tiff's had a bit of experience as well. And they know that opposition inside out. we're now on to our third game against each other, and the teams in the league. And I'm quite sure the Aitkens know each other. The teams are going to play inside out, and we know what to expect for each team.
The second half, Lawrence, you kind of hinted at it earlier, but it felt a little bit like the game against Spartans in Edinburgh, where we were 4-0 up at half time. That kind of game management, just kind of keeping the opposition at arm's length and just kind of seeing it out and not doing anything silly, I guess.
Yeah, there was always the wee bit that if we let them get one, it is game on because we weren't 4-0 up, but actually in a bizarre kind of way, I think Brian was the same. I actually felt pretty comfortable in the second half. I thought we're unlikely to give away anything silly, and that's certainly a turnaround from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So I was always pretty confident. Actually, when you get Dom Plank having left foot shot, right foot shot, Darren has a poke at goal, you're kind of thinking that arguably was more likelihood of us getting a third than them pulling one back. It wasn't quite easy to the second half, far from it, because we had to manage the game. But I think what Brian's saying is right. We are managing games better now. We are more ruthless. We are more switched on. In the past, as Brian says, we could have let a goal in and immediately let another goal in. But even the other way around, we could have gone 1-0 up and then in the past just sat back.
Yeah.
There's none of that. We saw that right away on Saturday. And, East Kilbride they're above us in the table. They've got a few problems. They got an absolute thrashing on Tuesday night at home to Spartans 6-0, which wasn't that surprised Spartans beat them, but that's an astonishing scoreline given the start East Kilbride have made to this season. But when you look at the players they've got in that squad, it was still a fair old job to do on Saturday to win as comfortably as we did.
Well, I'll come to our investigative journalist, Brian Martin. Obviously, Darren came off in the second half. I understand you've got a bit of an update in terms of how he's doing.
Yeah, I think it was just fatigue from the
Tuesday
night, Cammy. Plus, we're 2-0 up. I don't think Tiff was taking any chances. I think he maybe had a bit of sickness on the Thursday or Friday, but he was okay to play on the start. But I think it was just precautionary, bring him off and just save him for probably Stirling on Saturday.
We need to tell you about Lewis Reid, Cameron, where Brian and I were commentating at East Kilbride. We're right above the Stranraer dugout and the linesman, and late in the game, Lewis Reid looked a bit knackered for the last 20 minutes or so, Brian.
Yeah.
And the number of times the Stranraer bench shouted over, "Reedy, are you okay?" And Lewis Reid studiously ignored them from what we could see. I don't think he answered them. And I think that was just a player determined to play through the barrier, and which is a great credit to the big man. And he managed it. But equal, if you look at the highlights, you can see at the end, he's collapsed on the deck at the end of the game.
Yeah.
It was just a fair old shift after players had played minutes and minutes on a quagmire on the Tuesday night to do that again. I've got a question for Brian, though. He talked about the babyface assassin when James Dolan scored. We've got Bang Bang, Darren Lang. You got any other of these you're keeping up your sleeve to slip in at an appropriate point?
Well, I think, it was maybe, it never get really broadcast that much, but I was told about it by I'll say a committee member after Plank scored against, it would be the cup game. I called him the Cranleigh Cruyff.
Yeah,
I don't think I don't think that was really picked up, but he's from Cranleigh in England.
Sorry, yeah.
And I was told he's a Cranleigh Cruyff, but I don't think many people picked up on that. But I'll keep going.
I've got one for Sal when he eventually comes back, so but I'll not tell you until that time.
Good lad.
I guess with Darren coming off, and as you say, with Lewis struggling, as much as we as fans love the football, as much as I'm sure the players love playing rather than training, probably not the worst thing in the world, Lawrence, that Tuesday didn't go ahead.
I think that was I talked about the being the biggest shock since I licked the dreadful ever-ready battery as a kid. There was absolutely no. I'd have been absolutely stunned if that game had gone on, turn it the other way around. And actually, there was nothing from Stranraer in terms of trying to get it cancelled. You looked at the photos of the pitch on Tuesday, the weather bomb hit on Tuesday. in the town, and there was absolutely no danger that was on. But you're right, given the number of fixtures, probably no bad thing. And I'm still going back to my old hobby horse. Why do we need to rearrange these games so quickly in January? Probably particularly, I guess, if you're the league, you want to just make sure you don't end up in April with a backlog of rearranged fixtures, but probably particularly more so now, painfully, that we're out of the Cup. Surely there's no rush to reschedule it in. Wait a few weeks, and because our pitch is probably going to struggle to be ready for Annan a week on Saturday. Never mind, a midweek game at some point. There's also in the back of my mind thinking, for God's sake, let's delay it as long as possible and avoid having to use the floodlights if possible.
Brian, you gave man of the match to Matty Gillis. We've spoken at length tonight and previously about Dom Plank and Dean Cleland. Fair to say that we're utilising the loan market well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the man of the match, as Lawrence will tell you, could have went to any Stranraer player. It was so difficult choice, but I mean, probably that double effort by Gillis and our goal to save them scoring. But I just remembered what he'd done during the game. You know what I mean? And I keep on saying this. I think he reminds me of Ali McCann, Gillis. The way he goes about his business in the park. And look at the career Ali McCann's had. He for 18-year-old, the kid's got the world at his feet. He really has. And he'll go back to Hearts next season. And I wish him all the best because I think he's a fantastic player. The same with Don Plank and Dean Cleland. I think the wee boy for East Kilbride, wee Frankie, said, "Oh, he never got a game for us because he never played him." Mick Kennedy, for what it's worth, didn't even give him a start. So that's how he never got a game. But he's got a lot of pace, the boy. And I did say the first time he played for us, he's got good movement, and he showed that on Saturday.
We once spoke to my old friend Kenny Cameron on the It's No Easy podcast. Kenny is a coach, or was a coach at Spartans. He coached my son. He's coached a lot of players coming through. He actually contacted me. He spoke to me about Lyndon Tass being with us last week. He also said to me, how's Gillies getting on? And I'm like, what's the connection there? He says, he was at Spartans as well.
Yeah.
I said, I never came across him at all. And Kenny said he's the best young laddie I've ever coached, he said. His attitude is spot on. So he says, say I was asking for him. So praise there. And you're right, Cameron, I did have a wry smile when you said we're using the loan market well. But in terms of the three players who we've got on loan for a considerable period of time, every one of them is being influential within our good squad of players.
Obviously, speaking about the loan players there, Lawrence also mentioned Max Currie returning, and understand that Lawrence caught up with him after the full-time whistle.
Max, first of all, welcome back to Stranraer, and not a bad start. Come away at the K Park, difficult venue, 2-0 win, clean sheet. What did you make of the game?
Well, we knew before the game it was going to be a hard game against East Kilbride. They're going well in the league, same as us. And I thought, to be honest, first half we were great. We never gave up many chances, and then when we go 2-0 in at the break, second half's just about being solid at the back, and to be fair, I thought we were that.
How is it coming back in? Obviously Stranraer's familiar to you, but you're coming into a group of players who you've not really played with before.
There we go. No, do you know, there's a couple of players that I know of. I know BJ and Ronan Hughes. Obviously I've worked with the manager, I've worked with Jim, I've worked with Fez, stuff like that. So do you know what, they wouldn't have brought me back if they didn't think that I could have done a job for them. So you just need to come in and keep playing how you've performed before.
But how does it work for a goalkeeper coming in when you've not played with most of the defenders?
Well,
we saw you organising the defence.
I've trained with them a couple of times. I trained last Thursday, and just get to really know the names. You know, I was at the game against Queen's Park, get to know how they play, how they defend, what their movements are, stuff like that. So I've had enough time with them and on the training park and watch them to know my way in.
Must have been a bit of a strange week for you to come in, given what happened after the Queen's Park game off the pitch. We could probably ask you as a bit of a bystander in a way, how easy was it for the group of players to turn the mood around after?
Well, do you know, the mood is always going to be low after the game. When you find out that you could possibly put out the cup, that's obvious, especially with Rangers at the other end. But the manager said before the game, you need to pick yourself up. You don't know what the outcome's going to be. You might be put out the cup, you might know, but they're still going well in the league, so you need to put that at the forefront of your mind.
And it did feel, watching you set up the defence there at dead ball situations, as if you'd never been away. It was bizarre. What, 5 or 6 years later, it just looked like...
But you know, as I say,
More
that just comes from working with them training pitch. As you say, I watched them against Queen's Park today. I know I'm a bit older now, so I know like roughly a basic idea. But watching them against Queen's Park, I know how the players would like to move themselves. So, as I say, it's fairly easy. It's always good when you get better players in front of you.
It's good to have you back. 2-0 win, clean sheet. We're just looking for more of the same now.
Of course, I just need to kick on for that. There's no point in winning the day and then get into Tuesday and letting it go away. You just need to keep building on clean sheets. Clean sheets are the best thing that can happen for you in football, so we just need to build on it and go again.
As I said earlier, Brian, you were at the Queen's Park game and the pitch took a bit of a battering that night. Lawrence said it himself. No great surprise that we're sitting here and we're not talking about whatever would have happened against Clyde.
No, I mean, the word on the street, or the word at Key Park on Saturday is the game probably won't go ahead. You know, I don't think the groundsman had even managed to walk in it. So, I mean, I thought it was probably one of your best results of the season, that getting postponed. You know, because the players did need it. And I mean, you're going to play Clyde in that heavy pitch in a difficult away game to Stirling. You know, so I mean, I thought it was a great postponement. But I'm going to be a bit selfish. I want the rearranged game to be on the 17th, Tuesday the 17th of February, because that's a school week here. The kids are off for 3 days. So I can go nicely down on the Tuesday afternoon, no rushing. I can go back up nice and I can get maybe up to 10 o'clock in my bed on the Wednesday morning. So I'm being selfish. I want it the 17th of February.
I think the one thing that probably should be praised, should be recognised, is the fact that there was no messing about. The pitch inspection was done fairly early. There was none of this fans, because obviously you get football fans that are travelling from wherever. It's not Stranraer fans purely live in Stranraer. The pitch inspection was done nice and early. Whether we thought it would be off or not, but the decision was out there, Lawrence, and it saved anyone having to make that journey.
Aye, absolutely. I remember absolutely fulminating with rage a New Year's game at Ayr United about 20 years ago, where there was a pitch inspection at 9 in the morning. I was in Musselburgh. There was a pitch inspection at 9 in the morning. There was no decision. They said, we'll do another inspection at 1, and actually phoned Ayr United to ask, what the hell was going on here. Some of us have to travel, and the woman was quite reasonably saying, well, the teams are 50 miles apart. We want to give every chance to go on. We're having an inspection at 1 o'clock, and I would basically raging because I said, well, I'm not risking travelling for that. And she says, well, that's your decision. And she was right. But aye, you're absolutely spot on. The one for the Clyde game, even if you were travelling from a long way away, you would not have got very far, hopefully, before that was cancelled. And that's the way it should be. I get if Steny are playing Stirling Albion, you could maybe do it at 1 in the afternoon. But even then, you're right, you're going to catch folk out that travel a distance to see their team, and there's a hell of a lot of that goes on. Good to see the decision being made early, and actually looking at the pictures of the pitch. If any attempt had been made to play that, I suspect that pitch would be unplayable till April.
I think I'm right in saying there's not been a date announced for it to be rearranged, but as we've all said, hopefully better weather when that comes around. Before we go on to the Stirling match, including the Queen's Park game, Chris Aitken has won 27 games as Stranraer manager, which puts him ahead of Scott Agnew and Jamie Hamill. Wow. How have you enjoyed him as manager, Lawrence?
I think he comes into the firm category of he came in with a decent start. He had problems to contend with. He won that away game at Edinburgh City when we hadn't won an away game for over a year previously. So that was a good start. Then I think Tiff saw what the problems were. We had a kind of rocky game at Three Rovers. Results kind of struggled a bit more. I am now in the position of whatever happens this season, and hopefully it's as positive we are now, if not better. I'm enjoying it. I love what he's doing with the squad. I think that, I said earlier in the season, I think it's the best squad of players we've had since Fazzy's season during lockdown when we nearly went up. I think I'm at the stage now where I would say, arguably, I think we've got a better overall squad now. Faz was probably lucky in the riches he had up front in that squad. Yeah. and they were all fit, whereas Tiff's had the problem of numerous strikers being out injured. I'm loving watching the way they play. There's a confidence there. There's a commitment there. I think at the start of the season, we all called it that what we had missed for about 4 years was any kind of physicality in the squad. And you now see that we're not, I've not seen stats for Cards, but we're not overly physical. We'll be the same as other teams. You'll get bookings, whatever, We're not overly physical, but we're physical enough to take care of ourselves. I noticed a big debate about BJ Call's tackle on Joe Baldi on Saturday. I'm still not necessarily convinced that it was all one way, but I remain open to argument from various people. But no, loving watching it. He's positive, and I think from the start what Tiff did was other managers have almost kind of come in and played on the fact that we're Stranraer, we've got a small budget, oh woe is me, we've got to try and avoid being bottom. Tiff's kind of turned that round. It's the same aim, but he's turned that round by saying, I've been at this club, I was proud of my time at this club, I want us to be back up where they were when I was at this club. I accept the budget's no big, but actually what he's going now, and it'd be really fascinating to know how much is Tiff, how much is Ginge, how much is Martin Fellows, how much is the other backroom staff. I think there's a bit of everything going on there. They've got contacts, to bring in squad players from all over. We're getting slagged for recruiting the west of Scotland, but these guys knew where to pick. Hopefully it's looking like now the right players from the west of Scotland. Based on what we've been seeing, it absolutely is the right players. And, so what we're now bringing in youngsters from these levels, but they're not sort of youngsters that, they don't strike me as youngsters that nobody else will give a game to. I'm rambling slightly, but I'm actually loving watching us at this stage of the season. And, I'm actually having to convince others in this household, my son, that actually I'm looking up the table, not down the table.
Absolutely.
And it's been a wee while since I felt that way. Loving it.
What about yourself, Brian? Lawrence kind of touched on there in terms of the looking up the table, and you'll often hear managers who will say, "Oh, we want to be as high up the table as possible," and it sometimes feels a little bit like just kind of saying what the fans want to hear, basically. But what about yourself? How have you enjoyed the last 15, 16 months or so?
Well, Lawrence touched on the past years. Since then, I'm actually expecting Stranraer to win now on a Saturday. For the first time in years and years. We've beat every team in the league apart from Clyde. And
we haven't lost to them, Brian. And we haven't lost to them. So
lost to Clyde. So I'm turning up at games and say, well, we're going to win this game. And that's never happened for years and years. But I did say at the start of the season, I loved the way Tiff and Ginge have built the defence. And I did predict we'd be the top 3 defence in the league. And I'm glad to see we sneaked in again on Saturday. We're one of the top 3 defences in League 2. He's just built for the back. Probably Rough and Reid are one of my favourite ever partnerships at the back. They've got to be. They really are fantastic. I know we're going to lose Reid during the summer. I think that's quite inevitable. How do I say that word? Inevitable. I think he's gone. So we just got to.
Brian, sorry to interrupt, but we're on the 28th of January. Are you saying there we probably shouldn't be worried about him going the next 2 days?
No, I don't think so. Well, I think the reason is clubs know they're going to get him for the development fee in May, June. So why pay 50 or 60k when you can get him for tuppence during the summer?
Sorry, I interrupted you there.
Let's face it, Lewis Reid will play at a much higher level than Stranraer. A blind man can see it. He's such a talented boy. But we've got 2 or 3 others, who could play, and as I say, the defence. Evan Dunn, who'd heard Evan Dunn until Tiff brought him in? We watched him at, I think it was Halford that night, Lawrence. That was his very first appearance for us, I think. And we said, we like that right back, because he was marauding down the right-hand side, and I really liked him. Ekrapont has come onto a game really well, in the midfield, as I say, we've got Gillis and Quigg and Stewart, and, I could ring them all off, I just love the team, and hopefully it's going to be a really memorable season for us.
Well, I'll come to the both of you about this as well, but in terms of over that time frame, any kind of standout results Lawrence kind of mentioned, I think this, although there's been kind of ups and downs since then, I think that win at Edinburgh City in his first game, one, obviously you want to win your first game, you want to get that out of the way, but given how poor our away form had been previously, to get that kind of ticked off straight away just made a massive difference. What about yourselves? I'll come to you first, Lawrence. Is there a kind of particular result that stands out to you as kind of summing up the Chris Aitken era so far?
There's a couple, to be fair. There's actually several, but the ones I was going to say was there's the obvious one, the win over Queen of the South. But let's put that to the side, because that's pure and simply like, let's get it right up our rivals. I wouldn't have cared whether we played absolutely terribly that day and won or played brilliantly. But I think the one, you'll know the one I'm coming to, the 4-0 win at Spartans.
Yep.
We brushed aside a team who, by the way, have just taken 6 off East Kilbride. So there's something about them. It might be we got them on a bad day. It might be that actually they come up against us and they couldn't cope with us. But that's one. Also, you look back at games at places like East Fife last season. But to go to Spartans, the league leaders, and put 4 past them in the space
The first half.
about 20 minutes at the end of the first half. And then, as you and I have said frequently, more importantly, just manage the game out and not give them a sniff. That kind of comes back to Brian Martin's way to set a team out and organise it for different parts of the game.
What about yourself, Brian? Any games that kind of stand out?
Yeah, I think Lawrence kind of touched on it. East Fife game when we beat them 3, I think it was last March.
Aye.
That they were riding high at the top of the table. We went and we knew then we had a good team, and I mean it's changed a wee bit since then. But I thought that was a fantastic, and that was a rival, I think, of this Stranraer team. But I guess there's numerous games you can mention.
Think back to the nerves we all had in the summer because we knew Craig Ross was going, and that we were pretty much starting the team from scratch again, Brian. And if Craig Ross had gone a year earlier, I think we would have struggled at the back hugely. But actually, we knew Tiff had already identified Jordan Stewart, Scott Ruff. We knew nothing about them really, but that made us really nervous. Now we're at the stage where we're thinking, if somebody like Lewis Reid goes, if the Hearts guys are called back, I actually trust this management team to go out and replace these guys with somebody kind of as good or will fit the bill, basically.
It's funny you say that, Lawrence, that I had a quick look beforehand that if you look at the players that have been brought in, I think over the kind of 2 seasons, there's been more than 20 different faces coming in, which seems like a big turnover. But equally, if you were to kind of put them on a set of scales and have kind of success versus failure, I imagine it'd be very, very heavily weighted towards the successful signings.
When you talk about last January, we had that window. I think that was where Josh Lane came in, who was the boy from Queen's Park, Sam Kane. But also, I remember 1 or 2 fans raising their eyebrows at Aaron Quigg coming in because he played 2 or 3 games for us, I think, as a trialist. I didn't think he impressed overly much. Sorry, Quiggy, but see now, you'd have him in your starting 11 week in, week out. So the management team are seeing something there that quite clearly I don't see, and that's why I'm not a coach or a manager. But yeah, they're bringing in people, they're identifying players, bringing them in, and the players that we've brought in the summer, and I include Tommy Sharp in this. I'd be quite happy for any of them to go into the starting 11.
Well, one last thinking on this subject. It was suggested previously that the manager gets Stranraer, and that's why it's worked. I think, personally, that's kind of a bit too simplistic. I think that kind of downplays what inevitably must be going on in the background. Would you go along with that, Brian? That obviously it's not just a case of appoint a former player equals success. There's been a lot of work, and I dare say we only know the very tip of that.
No, I mean, we've appointed 2 former players. No disrespect to Jamie and Scott Agnew, but it never worked. So it's just I think he's a good manager. And he's got the right backroom staff behind him. And I think Tiff could have went anywhere with that backroom staff and built a team. I honestly do. Because they must have scouts out at these West of Scotland games. Plus, Tiff knew the leagues, didn't he?
Mhm.
You know, below us, and he knew the players would do absolutely fine, you know, in this environment. And he's been right with nearly every player. I can't think of a player who's been wrong with, you know. So I mean, power to his elbow, you know, and hopefully we've got to enjoy this team we can this season, because there'll be big changes during the summer, but just enjoy it while we've got them.
Do you know, one of the encouraging things, though, Cameron, there will be big changes. So the likes of, you know, Tiff said himself that enjoy the likes of Dom Plank while we've got him, because,
Yep.
you know, sure as fate that boy's going to go higher up. I think the same for Matty Gillis. I've not seen much of Dean Cleland yet, but he's made a pretty decent start. But what you do have then is that actually, if you are Hearts, and hopefully it goes the same way with Hibs with Dean Cleland, you're starting to think, actually, there's a point in putting players out to Stranraer. They're getting game time. Hopefully at the end of the season they say we can trust them. And I did notice, for example, Hearts are getting rid of their B team in the Lowland League at the end of this season, so they're going to be looking for loan deals, that kind of thing, to get their youngsters game time. The way Hearts are doing in the Premiership at the moment, they're unlikely to sort of take players out and put Matty and Dom in. It's just not going to happen because of the age of them. But actually, we can see the ability these players have got. And actually, what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way is that actually that relationship that we're building with these one or two other big clubs, that might prove important. So if we lose Dom and Matty in the summer, who's to say that Tiff, Ginge, Fez, can he go to Shelley Kerr at Hearts, to Angus Beath and say, well, you saw the game time we gave these guys. Have you got anybody in the year below that you want us to try this year?
Not just Hearts and Hibs, obviously other clubs
Absolutely.
will see exactly that as well, see how it's benefited the players. Just what I asked Brian there, is it too simple, Lawrence, to suggest that Chris Aitken's been successful simply because he gets Stranraer?
Aye, it is too simple. Clearly, I get that he gets Stranraer, and I said it a minute or two ago about how he came in and said, I remember where this club was when I was here, the mid-2010s, you know, and I want us to be back there. I want us to be in League One. I want us to be higher up the table. I don't want to commit Tiff to things he's not said there, but this is what we're taking from him. But it's not quite as simple as that. But that's a positive spin on it to start off with. He's not coming in and sort of saying, our budget's terrible, we can't afford anybody, we're going to struggle to get ninth place, and that's our aim. He's turned it around to, last season he wanted to avoid 10th, he succeeded in that. Then he's turned it around pretty much to like, we're not looking at that now, we want to push on. Now, we're in January, things could go horribly wrong and we might still end up further down the table. But equally, as Brian said, as I've said, I'm now looking at the top end of the table, and equally come April, May, who knows where we could be at the top end of the table. I appreciate Hearts. I appreciate Spartans thrashing East Kilbride takes them further away from us at the top end, but it's not undoable, and it's certainly not undoable. And Clyde will be thinking the same. Stirling Albion will be thinking the same. Forth are the same. It's not undoable to catch East Kilbride, Clyde, whoever's immediately above us, and get into top four at least, and if not, who knows, even higher. No guarantee it'll happen. No saying it'll happen. Tiffle, no guarantee it'll happen. But it's a hell of a lot more positive, and it's not just down to him getting Stranraer. There's a whole lot more going on with him and his backroom staff. There's a lot more talent than just sort of, I love this club, let's go and play.
Anyway, on to Stirling Albion, immediately below us in the table, Brian, 3 points adrift, a win apiece. I'll regret this when we're on next week and one of the teams has won 8-0 or something, but everything points to it being a tight game on Saturday.
Yeah, ironically, this is the last time we lost an away game in the league, on the 30th of August to Stirling Albion. We beat 1-0, and I think it was a game where we said when we come away, how did we manage to beat there? Shanley nipped in and scored the goal for a set piece. We should at least have got a draw out of the game, and we failed to see it out. And as I say, Shanley scored. I mean, I'm not going to hide behind the bush. I think we're a better team than Stirling Albion. I fully expect to go there on Saturday and win. I'm going to put my cards on the table. I think we will. I think they're kind of hot and cold, and the way we played against East Kilbride, we seem to be shrugged off the disappointment with the Queen's Park game. I mean, it's a bit, I know it's quite a thing to say that, but in this league, but I just think we're a better team than Stirling Albion, and if we can put our foot in the gas early on and turn the hot water tap on, as I would say, early on, I think they'll have a long day at the office.
1-0 defeat there earlier in the season, as Brian mentioned. We lost there 3-1. I think we scored right late on through, I think it was Mark Russell, and then immediately conceded for a 1-1 draw. We lost in a penalty shootout. We've not had much to shout about at Forthbank recently, Lawrence. Time for that to change.
No, that's why I'm smiling at everything that Brian Martin said. I do not disagree with one word of what Brian said. In terms of, I think we're a better team than Stirling Albion, but I'm conscious that I've been saying that for the last 2 years. I'm still pretty much waiting on us winning at Forthbank. When we lost earlier in the season, that last away defeat that we're talking about, Brian's right. Charney get the goal. We were all like, how the hell did we come away from this with nothing? But it wasn't just how did we come away with nothing. It's like, how have we come away from here again with nothing? So that can go one of two ways. It can go that we lose 1-0 again on Saturday, or manage to scrape a draw and we're coming away thinking, why did we not win that game? But there again, it's Forthbank. It's rapidly becoming our station park, or another station park for us. Or equally, we can turn it back round and say, you know what, we think we're a better team than this crowd. We've won 4-0 at Spartans earlier in the season. We've won twice at the K Park against East Kilbride. Clyde can't beat us. So what's to stop us actually going there and actually a point to prove on Saturday and say, they've beaten us already. We actually want to prove a point and actually get a win at Forthbank. And I'm not quite going to say what Brian said, that I'm fully expecting us to win at Forthbank. I'll say what I've said for the last few weeks, though. What I am now confident about with Stranraer, when somebody asks me, how's your team going to do at the weekend? I'm going to say, we will be competitive. And I couldn't confidently say that, I'm sorry to say it, but under Jamie Hamill, for example.
I'll spell it out. It's 9 games without a win at Forthbank. Of all people, it was Andy Stirling who scored the winner in Stirling for Stranraer. What team goes out, Brian, to, as I say, end that run?
Well, you'd think if they're injury free. I know there's a lot of niggles on Saturday. I mean, I think McManus, Danny told us coming out of the game on Saturday, it should be okay for this Saturday. But you would think the same 11 would start. I mean, I know Tiff can sometimes throw a curveball in there, but if they're all fit and raring to go, you'd think it would be the same 11 that started against East Kilbride. As long as they're fit. I mean, I know Lewis Reid seemed to be kind of, it was carrying something near the finish. Hopefully it's just a wee knock. The big man is usually okay after these things. And as I say, I mean, if the same 11 are fit and healthy, well, maybe Ekrapont maybe come back in and place a call. That could be the one, maybe the change. I don't know what, unless Ekrapont was maybe, but he came on right enough late on, unless he was carrying something. I don't know. That was a wee bit of surprise on Saturday, but I think BG Cole knows John Robertson maybe a wee bit better than Ekrapont. I don't know that. Well, that was a feeling, I know, but that could be the change, Ekrapont. But apart from that, it's hard to see any other changes.
The Ekrapont call thing was quite interesting because people were saying that on Saturday, that while they were surprised that Finn was out, they thought BJ Cole had been brought in specifically to deal with John Robertson. I don't know how much truth there is in that, but he dealt with him pretty well. Robertson, again, as a fan, it's in your mind, was Robertson kept quiet because we absolutely shackled him, or we've all read the goings on in the press this week? You just wonder if how much that goes, without going into any detail, how much that goes to play a part in how a player is playing. But what got me was later on, just going to check the stats. Yeah, Finn replaced BJ Cole on the hour mark, and it was quite interesting because Finn, at times, you could have kind of thought had been a bit part player for us. He scored spectacular goals, but what I loved on Saturday was Finn came on, stepped straight up and took a free kick that swerved into the box. And I think Finn has now become an established person in Stranraer fans' minds, that he's going to take corners, he's going to take free kicks, and they're going to be threatening free kicks. But actually, on Saturday, both of those players played a huge part in the win.
Just lastly, Lawrence, obviously it's been well documented. We had a poor start to the season. It'd be fair to say Stirling have had their ups and downs again. To put it in perspective, they beat Spartans on the 20th of September and then didn't win a league game for the next three months. Now it's one defeat in the last 5 league games for them. Welcome to the crazy world of League Two.
But everybody says you don't tend to get runs in League Two, but this season I think teams are having runs. I think Stirling Albion had a great start, as you say. Then they were rotten, and now they seem to be in a great run.
Yeah.
Again, I was looking at the stats of East Kilbride. I think they've won one in the last 7 or something now after Tuesday night's game. We were in the bizarre table a couple of weeks ago of the longest unbeaten run in the league, but we're also in the same table for without a win because we've had 4 draws in a row. So these runs are a bit weird. I wouldn't take Stirling Albion lightly. I mean, for heaven's sake, they went to Station Park and got, albeit a 1-0 win. It's a venue we'd be very happy to get a win at, although we have done it now. But they're sitting where they are in the table. They're no mugs. I don't think there's anybody in this league are mugs, frankly, but I do think the likes of Edinburgh City are slithering away a wee bit at the bottom. I don't want to go over the same ground we've done before, but no, Stirling Albion are no mugs. And I back Brian up. I firmly believe we've got a better squad man for man than Stirling Albion, but we've actually got to go out on Saturday and prove it.
I think that's a fitting place to wrap things up this week. If you can, get along to Forthbank and hopefully cheer on Stranraer to a win there. Thanks for joining us.